HasanAbi made a video about me. It is actually an almost 2-hour-long video that argues against me and the issues I explain in my video, Free Palestine, No Thanks. He is joined by a historian called Zachary Foster. The video was actually made a few months ago, and a large number of my followers have sent it to me. Anyway, the points he raised against me are still relevant today. I won't be showing it all because it is way too long, but I will share a link here below so you can watch the whole thing if you want to. I have no problem with people saying I'm wrong. However, I do have a problem with people calling me a racist and saying that I have been dehumanizing other people. So I will start with that.
He's just painting a picture that dehumanizes Palestinians. This broader initiative among Zionists to dehumanize the Palestinian people. He's being incredibly bigoted towards Muslims. You know, I am deeply anti-Palestinian. I am super racist against Arabs and Muslims.
Don't call me names just because you can't prove me wrong, and because I won't comply with the rules of progressive political correctness. Do I make generalizations? Yes, we all do, both when we say good things about any group and when we criticize it. If I say that men are more violent than women, does that mean that all men are violent? Does it mean that I hate all men? Does it mean that there are no violent women? No, no, and no. But if 95% of men in jail all over the world are men, then you can say that men are more violent. If I say that most Muslim countries are undemocratic, or that Muslim society is a very religious society and doesn't tolerate gay people, am I wrong? Now, are all Muslims anti-democracy? And do all Muslims hate gays? No, but those who set the tone are and do. And that's why almost all Muslim countries are undemocratic. That's why there is a high level of violence. And that's why of the worst countries in the world in which to be gay, the vast majority of them are, well, Muslim. HasanAbi, do you disagree with me? Is what I just said dehumanizing? If so, let's set this challenge for ourselves. You have 10 times more followers than I do. How about I say to my followers, go to Jewish and Christian countries and communities, stand in the main square and say, I hate God and I'm gay and the Bible and the New Testament are total nonsense. And you tell your followers to go to Muslim countries and societies and say the same. I hate God and I'm gay and the Quran is total nonsense. I'm pretty sure that by the end of the challenge, I will have way more followers that are still alive than you will. And you know that I'm right about that. Let's start with some history. The UN proposed the division of the land into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews said yes, and the Arabs said no, and then started a war in a bid to eliminate the Jews. The morning after the partition plan, Palestinians attacked Abbas and murdered 5 Jews. This is how the war was started. They were offered a state, they said no, and start murdering Jewish civilians.
Yeah, this is pure garbo. Is there even a dispute? I feel like to say that this was Arabs immediately fighting against Jews at this point out of nowhere is a lie by omission, right? Like it's not like this started in 1948.
That's exactly correct. I think the basic problem with this story, again, is plucking out facts to distort history, which is to say that to pretend like that there wasn't already 20, 30 years of rejection, of resistance against Zionism, that Zionism, wasn't fundamentally a violent movement that sought to displace and depopulate the land, I think is sort of the history and the context that's being left out here. And I think more importantly, what he does after, he basically says, and in the next minute, he says, well, you know what, like the Arabs started the war, so, it's their fault that there are 750,000 Palestinians, is a class at 750,000 Palestinian refugees. It's just a classic instance of victim blaming.
The last sentence is a good one. If you start a war to eliminate the Jews and you lose, you're not the victim. Every word I said here is true. The UN proposed the logical two-state solution. The Jews were not happy about it, but were willing to compromise and accepted it. The Arabs were not happy about it and were not willing to compromise and rejected it, and instead started to kill Jewish civilians. This is how the war started. 5 Jews were killed when Arab attacked a bus from Netanya to Jerusalem on the 30th of November 1948. I do agree with HasanAbi that the Arabs didn't start being violent then. They had already started to attack Jews as far back as 1920. Now, I'm saying that the Arabs were violent, and HasanAbi is saying that the Jews embarked on displacing and depopulating the Arabs. Who should you believe? Me. And here is why. As I said in the video, I can give you the names of many Jewish settlements that were destroyed by Arabs' attacks before 1947. All HasanAbi can say is that what I'm saying is pure garbo. He can't name one Arab village that was destroyed by Jews before the Arabs started the war to eliminate the Jews. Come on, HasanAbi, I will give you another chance. Give me the name of one village that the Jews stole or destroyed from the Arabs. After that, they go on talking about the fact that Israel didn't allow the Arabs to return to their villages. True, you don't let the people who started a war to eliminate you have another shot at doing the same thing again. But all this demonstrates the extent of their lack of understanding of that time period in general. After World War II, many new states were created. Israel, East Germany, West Germany, Jordan, the two Koreas, India, Pakistan, and the borders of Eastern European countries changed too. Tens of millions of people were displaced as a result of war and new borders. 14 million Muslims and Hindus were forced to leave their homes in 1947 and 1948. Millions died in the process. About the same number of Germans had to leave the eastern territories, and more than 1 million Germans died while being evacuated after the war. Same story in the Balkans. None of the tens of millions of people who were forced to leave their homes between 1945 to 1949 as a result of wars and the creation of nation-states were allowed to move back. Only the Arabs of Palestine have this fantasy of return. It is an illusion, and it has been an illusion right from the start. The world doesn't work that way, like it or not. You can't just start a war, and when it turns out that you are going to lose, instead of accepting it, you want to turn back time and get your villages back. And who is fueling all this? The UN. Did you know
Queers
that the
for
UN has
Palestine.
two
I
agencies
love
for
that.
refugees? One for hundreds of millions of refugees all over the world, and another one called UNRWA, which is only for the most privileged refugees on earth, the Palestinians.
That's. Go ahead.
So, well, one thing I would point out here is that this refugee agency, UNRWA, was established in the aftermath of shortly after World War II, when the Jews faced persecution by Nazi Germany, and millions of Jews perished. And I think one of the reasons, by the way, why the UN and the United States at the time never really said much about the creation of the Palestinian refugees. There were even like New York Times columnists on the ground in Palestine that were reporting on what was happening, and the New York Times chose not to publish some of those articles. There was essentially, I think, owing to Holocaust guilt and owing to guilt on the part of Americans and Europeans, there was this desire not to speak out against what the Zionists had done to Palestinians in 1948, and also kind of give Palestinians sort of maybe some extra special treatment in the UN. That's an argument made by Ilan Pappé recently. So, it's like, well, you're kind of leaving out a lot of important facts to the story.
What did he just say? I really admire their ability to talk without actually saying anything. I point out that there are two refugee agencies in the UN. One for all the refugees in the world, and one called UNRWA that is only for the Palestinians. Is that true or not? It is a very simple thing to check. I will throw in an interesting fact here. The definition of a refugee, a regular, not Palestinian refugee, stays a refugee until he settles down. When it comes to the privileged Palestinian refugees, the fact is that they pass the title of refugees to their children and grandchildren. This is why there are more Palestinian refugees every year. And for some reason, this definition of refugees only applies to the Palestinians. At the beginning of the video, I had talked about the long-established connection that Jews had with the land of Israel. Jews have always migrated, or as we say in Hebrew, gone up to the land of Israel. In the 17th
Would
and
pause
18th
right there,
centuries.
because that's a lie. So He's fundamentally distorting Jewish history. He's trying to paint a picture that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Jews have always been, as he said, Jews have always migrated to the land of Israel. I mean, this is just total nonsense. Again, if he knew anything about Jewish theology, he would know that he's just spewing myths and propaganda, because for the overwhelming majority of Jewish history, it was actually forbidden for Jews to migrate to Israel. And the reason was very simple, which is that in the end of days, Jews have eschatological beliefs, just like Muslims and Christians. And the eschatological belief among Jews is that Jews should not live, let alone move to the Holy Land until God decides so. It's God's decision. Jews believe that human action to hasten the arrival of the Messiah violated Torah law, and therefore not only are you not allowed to live there, you're definitely not allowed to move there. And so he's kind of really distorting Jewish history here. It's really a grotesque distortion, I would say.
Okay, any Jew watching this now won't be able to believe what is being said here. Listen, Zach, we can debate how good of a Palestinian historian you are, but let me say it in the clearest terms possible. A Jewish historian, you are not.
For the overwhelming majority of Jewish history, it was actually forbidden for Jews to migrate to Israel.
What? In 1882, Jews from Yemen came up to Israel. In 1850, Jews from Morocco came up to Israel. In 1740, the followers of Baal Shem Tov came to Israel. In 1808, the followers of Hagaon Mivilna came to Israel. To Zach and all of you who don't know Jewish society, I just mentioned the main groups of Jews: the Yemenites, the Sephardic, and the two Ashkenazi groups, the Hasidic and the Prushim. All Jewish groups had migrated to the land of Israel long before modern Zionism. Harambam, Maimonides, probably the most important rabbi of the last 1,000 years, came up to Israel in the 12th century. All Jews pray towards Jerusalem, and one of the most well-known Jewish sayings is Bashana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim, which means next year in Jerusalem. So, on what exactly is Zach basing his claim that Jews were not allowed to migrate to Israel? The Three Oaths is a midrash, which means Jewish text, that says that Jews should not rebel against the nation of the world and forcefully reclaim the land of Israel. This is one out of thousands and thousands of Jewish texts about the importance of the land of Israel to the Jews. And even this text, the Three Oaths, doesn't say, of course, that Jews are not allowed to migrate to the land of Israel. This midrash is used by a very small number of extreme ultra-Orthodox groups to justify their objection to Zionism and the modern state of Israel, but not to living in the land of Israel. These two groups, Satmer and Neturei Karta, want Israel to be a religious country based on the Bible and not on Western democratic values. Some of them say that only after the Messiah comes will Israel be rebuilt. But even these tiny Jewish ultra-Orthodox groups have followers in Israel. The connection between the Jews and the land of Israel is and always has been one of the bases of Judaism. Zach, I will say it again so it is crystal clear. Even the smallest Jewish groups that oppose Zionism and the state of Israel for religious reasons have followers living in Israel. HasanAbi continues to claim that I don't know Jewish history because I said that the Muslims prevented the Jews from going up to the Temple Mount. And HasanAbi claims that Jews are not allowed to go there. He actually makes it sound as if the Muslims are doing the Jews a favor by preventing them from praying at their holiest site.
So this guy's he doesn't really understand Judaism very well, because to most religious authorities, the most halachic authorities, it is forbidden for a Jew to go up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, to enter into what used to be the Temple Mount.
On a personal level, it made me laugh because until last October, I was going up to Temple Mount almost weekly with my tourists, and thousands of Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews would be there too. But Zach is right. Orthodox Jews don't go to where that temple once stood because they don't want to step on the holiest part of the temple. By the way, thank you, Zach, for acknowledging the fundamental truth that many Muslims continue to deny, that the Jewish temple stood where the Dome of the Rock stands today. The thing is that the Temple Mount is huge, so Orthodox Jews do indeed go up there and walk around the area of the temple. Some Orthodox Jews don't want to go at all. That is true. But those who don't want to go up are not the majority of Jews in Israel. And anyway, we're not talking about whether people want to go or not. It is about whether they have the choice. And when Muslims are banning Jews from praying on the Temple Mount, then something is fundamentally wrong. I encourage all Jews to visit Temple Mount. As a tour guide, I have a secret motive here. I want everyone to visit their holiest sites. Christians, come to Israel and visit Nazareth and Jerusalem. Jews, come to Jerusalem and visit the Temple Mount. And Muslims, visit your holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. I want everyone to be able to pray freely at their holiest sites. That is the religious freedom that I believe in. Now that we have established that Zach doesn't know too much about Jewish history, let's talk about Palestinian history. Let's start with the name. After the Romans destroyed the temple, the Jews rebelled again, and the Romans changed the name of the region from Judea to Palestina, and this is how the name came to be. It was intended to disconnect the Jews from the name
That's
Judea.
a lie, by the way. I don't think it's worth getting into, but there's this myth among Jews that, Hadrian put down the this revolt. That, remember in 135 CE, you have this revolt by Bar Kokhba, who's revered among Zionists and Jews for resisting Roman rule. And the story the mythology goes, he, in order to vengefully erase the name Judea from history, he replaced it with Palestine. I've written about this in my PhD dissertation. That's just a myth. There's no actual evidence to support that. It's basically just been propagated by Zionists and Jews for the purpose of claiming that basically even the name Palestine itself is somehow like some illegitimate name. So, but it's just total nonsense and propaganda. Even the history itself. I mean, if you actually look and dig into the sources of
he wrote his dissertation on this, and I'm just spewing Zionist myth. Let's see. He provided as evidence a section from a page in Wikipedia called Syria, Palestina. So let's open it up. Here it says, following the suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jerusalem was rebuilt as a Roman colony under the name of Ilia Capitolina, and Judea was renamed Syria, Palestina. At the top of the page, it says that the province of Syria, Palestina was established in 136, and that the previous name, province of Judea, was used until 132. So, just to be completely clear, we have the province of Judea that existed until 132. We have the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was a huge Jewish revolt against the Romans. About 500,000 Jews died, and some Roman legions were destroyed. On the page about the Bar Kokhba revolt, it says, following the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt, the center of Jewish society shifted from Judea to Galilee. The province of Judea was renamed Syria, Palestina, as an intended punishment for the Jews and as a result of the desire of the region's non-Jewish inhabitants. So this is pretty much what I said, and the passage that he brought up doesn't even contradict what I said. I just like to add that the Romans didn't invent the name Palestina. It was used by Greek historians such as Herodotus hundreds of years before the Romans to describe the Philistines, who are mentioned in Egyptian sources as well as in the Jewish Bible, Plishtim, who settled on the southern coastal area of the land of Israel and disappeared when the Babylonians conquered the region in the 6th century BC. But it was the Romans who destroyed the name Judea and created a province named Palestina. All people have the right to identify themselves as they wish, and the Palestinians are no different. It is none of my business how they identify themselves. But you can't reinvent history. The name Palestine was decided on by the Roman Empire, and its border decided on by the British Empire. HasanAbi and Zach accuse me of not talking enough about 1948. So it's back to contemporary history.
I published a paper a few years ago with Emmanuel Beshka, a colleague of mine, and we found the term Palestinian in Arabic sources something like 114 times from 1898 to 1914. So before there were any British colonizers in Palestine, Palestinians had already been calling themselves Palestinians for 2 decades, and actually if you go into Western sources and English sources and German sources and Russian sources, you actually have, the term Palestinian is being used already from the 1870s onwards. So he's just regurgitating and repeating lies that have been debunked already for years.
So Zach, I'm saying that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people, and you're saying that you found 114 instances of the Arabs of Palestine calling themselves Palestinians before 1914. So, if you're right, then how do you explain the fact that the leaders of the Arabs in Palestine in the 1940s never used the term Palestinians? Isn't that strange? And you know what is also strange? That you never mentioned the names of the leaders of the Arabs in Palestine. You made an almost 2-hour-long video and you didn't mention the leaders of the Arabs of Palestine in the most important era. Now, I think I know why you didn't mention them. Because they don't make the Arabs of Palestine look very good. So the leader of the Arabs of Palestine from 1921 until the 1950s was Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini. Let's start with this quote. Arabs, rise as one and fight for your sacred rights. Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion. This saves your honor. God is with you. So the leader of the Arabs of Palestine doesn't sound very friendly. And he uses the word Arabs, not Palestinians. Now you might say this is just one quote, and they are accusing me of distorting history with facts. So Zach and HasanAbi give me a quote from the leader of the Arabs in Palestine in which he talks about the Palestinians. I want to give you another quote by Amin al-Husseini. This one he had said in Berlin in 1943. Why was the leader of the Arabs of Palestine in Berlin in 1943? Because he and other Arab leaders were collaborating with the Nazis. So in November 43, in a speech held in front of Muslims in Berlin, the Mufti said, Jews are selfish. The Jews are the enemy of Islam. They are the ones who killed the Prophet Muhammad. The Arabs, and especially the Muslims, must expel the Jews from Arab countries. This is the ultimate solution. The Prophet Muhammad used this solution 1300 years ago. Germany never harmed the Muslims and is fighting against our common enemy, the Jews. The most important thing is that they have found the final solution to the Jewish problem. These are two very interesting quotes from the biggest leader of the Arabs in Palestine, I would say. And it is not less interesting that HasanAbi and Zach failed to mention him at all. And just while we are at it, on the important subject of the leaders of the Arabs of Palestine, the Mufti's rival was a man called Fawzi el-Kawakji. And where was he in the 1940s? In Nazi Germany, also collaborating with the Nazis. In 1947, he said, the battle between the Arabs and the Jews is a total battle, and the only possibility is the annihilation of every Jew in Palestine and all Arab countries. So here we have two interesting facts. First, the leaders of the Arabs never called their people Palestinians, always Arabs. Second, even before the Nakba, when the Arabs started a war to eliminate the Jews and lost it, even before that, the Arabs called for the elimination of all the Jews. An important fact that knocks the bottom out of the narrative that uses the Nakba to explain the origin of the Arabs' hatred towards the Jews. There is actually another aspect that emerged when reading about Haj Amin al-Husseini's personal history. He was a religious leader. In the video, HasanAbi and Zach, like all progressives, run away from religion as if it were a fire. Zach, regarding the first point I made, if the Arab leaders of Palestine never used the term Palestinians, don't you think that when talking about them, it is more accurate to refer to them as Arabs of Palestine and not as Palestinians? I'm just a simple Zionist and you're the historian, but I think that it is important to be accurate and refer to them using the term they themselves use and not the new modern term that is used today. I could go on and maybe I will do a part 2, but one last thing in this video. HasanAbi said a total of 16 times that I make Zionist propaganda. Every argument I bring up, he says it's Zionist propaganda, while he himself is talking about the biggest propaganda lie of the war, Deir Yassin. When he's talking about 1948 and the atrocities that the evil Israelis committed, he mentions Deir Yassin. And then he mentions it again. The pro-Palestinians don't have many examples, so they use the same one over and over and over again. So, what is Deir Yassin? As I mentioned in the beginning, the first action taken by the Arabs after the UN offered a two-state solution was to attack a bus traveling from Netanya to Jerusalem. The Arabs ambushed the Jews on the roads. Deir Yassin is situated on the road to Jerusalem, which was the biggest Jewish city with 100,000 Jews living there in 1948. After hundreds of Jews had been killed by Arabs on the roads, the Jews decided to move to the offensive. As HasanAbi said, there was a peace pact between the village of Deir Yassin and the Jewish neighborhood, but Arab gangs broke it and shot at Jews. So it made sense to take over the village. This is what you do in war. Did some civilians die? Yes, and I've talked about it in this video. If you really want to go into the details, I will leave another video. But why did Deir Yassin become a symbol of atrocities committed by the Jews? Listen to this Arab survivor.
Their loudspeakers blared out, "Lay down your arms. Run for your lives." Then I heard our machine gun. I was kneeling down like this. When I looked up, I saw the village ablaze. We gathered in Jerusalem at the Hebron gate. We checked who was missing and who had survived. Then the Palestinian leaders arrived, including Dr. Khalidi.
I asked Dr. Khalidi how we should cover the story. He said, "We must make the most of this." So he wrote a press release.
Arab radio stations passed on the false reports, ignoring the protests of the witnesses.
We said there was no rape. He said we have to say this so the Arab armies will come to liberate Palestine from the Jews.
So Deir Yassin is a propaganda bomb that exploded in the hands of the Arabs who created it. The Arab thought that if they invented horrifying stories about the Jews, it would make the Arabs fight harder. But instead, these fabricated stories had the opposite effect and made the Arabs run away from their villages. The thing is that people like HasanAbi and Zach still use this propaganda today. They are still using Deir Yassin as the example of how evil the Jews are. That is it for now. I want to thank my supporters. It is only thanks to you that I can keep making these videos. See you next week. Yalla bye.